Hey, howdy, hey. Sorry, I got caught up in the stupid over at stupid people's streams. I saw you made an appearance, Spider Dog. Did you get timed out for 24 hours? Hey, Sherry, Linda, Nomad, who else? It oh, Priestess. Hey, Priestess. There was some stupid ideas going on over there as usual. So I don't know if Jeff's clipping any of it up or not. So anywho, I will go ahead and get started. We have yes. I need to bring that back up. So when there were no external records that you could refer to, even the outline of your own life lost its sharpness. 1984, 1949. The telescreen was giving forth an ear splitting whistle, which continued on the same note for 30 seconds. It was not 7:15. It was not 7:15. Oh, 07:15. Okay. I'm like, that's some Jethro Bodine word there at the beginning, and I have never caught it. So, getting up time for office workers. Winston wrenched his body out of bed. Naked for a member of the outer party, received only 3,000 clothing coupons annually, and a suit of pajamas was 600. And seized a dingy singlet and a pair of shorts that were lying across the chair. The physical jerks would begin in 3 minutes. The next moment, he was doubled up by a violent coughing fit, which nearly always attacked him soon after waking up. It emptied his lungs so completely that he could only begin breathing again by lying on his back and taking a series of deep gasps. His veins had swelled with the effort of the cough, and the varicose ulcer had started itching. 30 to 40 group, yapped a piercing female voice. 30 to 40 group, take your places, please. 30 to 40s. Winston sprang to attention in front of the telescreen, upon which the image of a youngish woman, scrawny but muscular, dressed in tunic and gym shoes, had already appeared. But was that that was the Apple commercial, right? Where they were doing that, and then they threw the hammer at the telescreen way back in the 80s. So, arms bending and stretching, she rapped out. Take your time by me. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, comrades, put a bit of life into it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Todd could sing that much better, by the way. I was never much into cadence exercise. The pain of the coughing fit had not quite driven out of Winston's mind the impression made by his dream, and the rhythmic movements of the exercise restored it somewhat as he mechanically shot his arms back and forth, wearing on his face the look of grim enjoyment which was considered proper during physical jerks. He was struggling to think his way backward into the dim period of his early childhood. It was extraordinarily difficult. Beyond the late 50s, everything faded. Hey, Wyatt. How are you, bud? When there were no external records that you could refer to, even the outline of your own life lost its sharpness. You remembered huge events which had quite probably not happened. You remembered the detail of incidents without being able to recapture their atmosphere. And there were long blank periods to which you could assign nothing. Everything had been different then. Even the names of countries and their shapes on the map had been different. Airstrip 1, for instance, had not been so called in those days, had been called England or Britain, though London, he felt certainly, had always been called London. Hey, Double D's. Howdy ho. Oh, you're gonna need a nap after that. Why? For several months during his childhood, there had been confused street fighting in London itself, some of which he remembered vividly. But to trace out the history of the whole period to say who was fighting whom at any given moment would have been utterly impossible. Since no written record and no spoken word ever made mention of any other alignment than the existing one. At this moment, for example, in 1984, if it was 1984, Oceania was at war with Eurasia and in alliance with Eastasia. In no public or private utterance was it ever admitted that the three powers at any time grouped along different lines. Actually, as Winston well knew, it was only 4 years since Oceania had been at war with Eastasia and in alliance with Eurasia. But that was merely a piece of furtive knowledge with which he happened to possess because his memory was not satisfactorily under control. Oh yeah, Wyatt. I was listening to it before I went live. Was deluded as always. Officially, the change of partners had never happened. Oceania was at war with Eurasia, therefore Oceania had always been at war with Eurasia. The enemy of the moment always represented absolute evil, and it followed that any past or future agreement with him was impossible. The frightening thing, he reflected for the 10,000th time as he forced his shoulders painfully backward with his hands on his hip, they were gyrating bodies from the waist and exercise that was supposed to be good for the back muscles. The frightening thing was that it might all be true. If the party could thrust its hand in the past and say that of this or that event, it never happened, that surely was more terrifying than mere torture and death. Who controls the past? Ran the party slogan. Controls the future. Who controls the present? Controls the past. The party said that Oceania had never been in alliance with Eurasia. He, Winston Smith, knew that Oceania had been in alliance with Eurasia as short a time as 4 years ago. But where did that knowledge exist? Only in his own consciousness? Hey, Cap, which in any case must soon be annihilated. And if all others accepted the lie which the party imposed, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and became truth. Who controls the past? Ran the party slogan. Controls the future. Who controls the present? Controls the past. And yet the past, though of its nature alterable, never had been altered. Whatever that was true now was true from everlasting to everlasting. It was quite simple. All that really needed was an unending series of victories over your own memory. Reality control, they called it in Newspeak. Doublethink. Winston sank his arms to his sides and slowly refilled his lungs with air. His mind slid away into the labyrinth world of doublethink. To know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which canceled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them, to use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy. To forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again. And above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety. Consciously to induce unconsciousness, and then once again to become unconscious of the act of hypnosis you had just performed. Even to understand the word doublethink involved the use of doublethink. The past, he reflected, had not merely been altered, it had been actually destroyed. For now, for how could you establish even the most obvious fact when there existed no record outside of your own memory? Hey, Woodrow. He tried to remember in what year he had first heard mention of Big Brother. He thought it must have been at some time in the 60s, but it was impossible to be certain. In the party histories, of course, Big Brother figured as the leader and guardian of the revolution since its earliest days. His exploits had been gradually pushed backwards in time until already they extended into the fabulous world of the 40s and the 30s, when the capitalists in their strange cylindrical hats rode through the streets of London in great gleaming motor cars or horse carriages with glass sides. There was no knowing how much of this legend was true and how much invented. Winston could not even remember at what date the party itself had come into existence. He did not believe he had ever heard the word Ingsoc before the 1960, and it was possible to think in its old speak form, English socialism, that is to say, it had been current earlier. Everything melted into mist. Sometimes, indeed, you could put your finger on a definite lie. It was not true, for example, as he claimed, in the party history books that the party had invented aeroplanes, but remembered aeroplanes since his earliest childhood. But you could prove nothing. I want to go back up. So all of this talk of unconsciousness, and then once again to become unconscious of the act of hypnosis that you had just performed. Very, very much so in Newspeak, Woodrow. So for those of you who were tuned in this morning, or I'm sorry, this afternoon with the Tao Te Ching, this is exactly what we're talking about, is these contradictory terms about having no desire, but the desire to have no desire is desire in and of itself, right? And then I just like how everything's kind of fitting together and what we've been reading over the last few days. It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words, from 1984, 1949. In the low-ceilinged canteen, deep underground, the lunch queue jerked slowly forward. Hey, Jenny with an eye. The room was already very full and deafeningly noisy. From the grill at the counter, the steam of stew came pouring forth, with the sour metallic smell which did not quite overcome the fumes of Victory gin. On the far side of the room, there was a small bar, a mere hole in the wall where gin could be bought at 10 cents, the large nip. Just the man I was looking for, said the voice at Winston's back. He turned round. It was his friend Simi? I'll go with Simi, who worked in the research department. Perhaps friend was not exactly the right word. You did not have friends nowadays. You had comrades. But there were some comrades whose society was pleasanter than that of others. Simi was a philologist, a specialist in newspeak. Indeed, he was one of the enormous team of experts now engaged in compiling the 11th edition of the Newspeak Dictionary. How's the dictionary getting on? Said Winston, raising his voice to overcome the noise. Slowly, said Simi. I'm on the adjectives. It's fascinating. He had brightened up immediately at the mention of Newspeak. He pushed his pannikin aside, took up his hunk of bread in one delicate hand and his cheese in the other, and leaned across the table so as to speak without shouting. So, Simi, gotcha. A Greek island and municipality. Let's see. The 11th edition is the definitive edition, he said. We're getting close. We're getting the language into its final shape. The shape it's going to have when nobody speaks anything else. When we finished it, people like you will have to learn it all over again. You think I dare say that our chief job is inventing new words? But not a bit of it. We're destroying words, scores of them, hundreds of them every day. We're cutting the language down to the bone. The 11th edition won't contain a single word that will become obsolete before the year 2050. He bit hungrily into his bread and swallowed a couple of mouthfuls, then continued speaking with a sort of pedant's passion. His thin, dark face had become animated. His eyes had lost their mocking expression and grown almost dreamy. It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. Of course, the great wastage is in the verbs and the adjectives, but there are hundreds of nouns that can be got rid of as well. It isn't only the synonyms, there are also antonyms after all. What justification is there for a word which is simply the opposite of some other word? that they do, Wyatt, that they do. A word contains its opposite in itself. Take good, for instance. If you have a word like good, what need is there for a word like bad? Ungood will do just as well. Better, because it's an exact opposite, which the other word is not. Or again, if you want a stronger version of good, what sense is there having a whole string of vague, useless words like excellent and all the rest of them? Plus good covers the meaning. Or double plus good if you want something stronger still. Of course, we use those forms already, but in the final version of Newspeak, there'll be nothing else. In the end, the whole notion of goodness and badness will be covered by only 6 words. In reality, only 1 word. Don't you see the beauty of that, Winston? It was BB's Big Brother's idea originally, of course. He added as an afterthought, kind of like go or no go. Yeah. Go or ungo, I guess they would put it, because they wouldn't want to complicate the opposites of words. A sort of vapid eagerness flitted across Winston's face at the mention of Big Brother. Nevertheless, Simi immediately detected a certain look of enthusiasm. You haven't a real appreciation of Newspeak, Winston, he said almost sadly. Even when you write it, you're still thinking in old speak. I've read some of those pieces that you write in the Times occasionally. They're good enough, but they're translations. In your heart, you'd prefer to stick to old speak with all its vagueness and its useless shades of meaning. You don't grasp the beauty of the destruction of words. Do you know that Newspeak is the only language in the world whose vocabulary gets smaller every year? Winston, did you know that? Of course, he smiled sympathetically. He hoped, not trusting himself to speak. Simi bit off another fragment of the dark-colored bread, chewed it briefly, and went on. Don't you see the whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make the thought crime literally impossible, because there will be no words in which to express it. Every concept that can ever be needed will be expressed by exactly 1 word, with its meaning rigidly defined and all its subsidiary meanings rubbed out and forgotten. Already in the 11th edition, we're not far from that point. But the process will still be continuing long after you and I are dead. Every year, fewer and fewer words, and the range of consciousness always a little smaller. Even now, of course, there's no reason or excuse for committing thought crime. It's merely a question of self-discipline, reality control. But in the end, there won't be any need for even that. The revolution will be complete when the language is perfect. Newspeak is Ingsoc, and Ingsoc is Newspeak. He added with a sort of mystical satisfaction, has it ever occurred to you, Winston, that by the year 2050, at the very latest, not a single human being will be alive who could understand such a conversation as we're having now? Except, began Winston doubtfully and then stopped. It had been on the tip of his tongue to say, except for the proles, but he checked himself, not feeling fully certain that his remark was not in some way unorthodox. Simi, however, had divined that what he was about to say. The proles are not human beings, he said carelessly. By 2050, earlier probably, all real knowledge of old speak will have disappeared. The whole literature of the past will have been destroyed. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Byron, they'll exist only in newspeak versions, not merely changed into something different, but actually changed into something contradictory of what they used to be. Even the literature of the party will change. Even the slogans will change. How could you have a slogan like freedom is slavery when the concept of freedom has been abolished? The whole climate of thought will be different. In fact, there will be no thought as we understand it. Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness. One of these days, thought Winston with sudden deep conviction, Simi will be vaporized. He's too intelligent. He sees too clearly and speaks too plainly. The party does not like such people. One day he will disappear. It is written in his face. That's the problem with smart people and totalitarianism, right? They can't have thinkers and people who speak plainly. They need people to obfuscate words and and pretend like they're not saying something when they're actually saying something. Not making accusations when they're making accusations. Crime stop means the faculty of stopping short as though by instinct at the threshold of any dangerous thought. 1984. From 1984, 1949. Exactly, Sherry. Alternative facts. There are known knowns and there are known unknowns. A party member is required to have not only the right opinions, but the right instincts. Many of the beliefs and attitudes demanded of him are never plainly stated and could not be stated without laying bare the contradictions inherent in Ingsoc. If he is a person naturally orthodox, or in newspeak, a good thinker, he will, in all circumstances, know without taking thought what is true belief or the desirable emotion. But in any case, an elaborate mental training undergone in childhood and grouping itself round the newspeak words, crime stop, black, white, and doublethink makes him unwilling and unable to think deeply on any subject whatever. A party member is expected to have no private emotions, no respites from enthusiasm. He is supposed to live in a continuous frenzy of hatred of foreign enemies and internal traitors, triumph over victories, and self abasement before the power and wisdom of the party. The discontents produced by his bare, unsatisfying life are deliberately turned outwards and dissipated by such devices as the 2 minutes hate and the speculations which might possibly induce a skeptical or rebellious attitude are killed in advance by his early acquired inner discipline. The first and simplest stage in the discipline, which can be taught even to young children, is called in newspeak crime stop. Crime stop means the faculty of stopping short, as though by instinct, at the threshold of any dangerous thought. It includes the power of not grasping analogies, of failing to perceive logical errors, of misunderstanding the simplest of arguments if they are inimical to insight, and of being bored or repelled by any train of thought which is capable of leading to heretical direction. Crime stop, in short, means protective stupidity. Stupidity is not enough. On the contrary, orthodoxy, in the full sense, demands a control over one's own mental processes, as complete as the contortionist over his body. Oceanic society rests ultimately on the belief that Big Brother is omnipotent and the party is infallible. The world that surrounds the upper crust of any society is more strict and rigid than that of the lower. Your freedom depends on assimilating to what those in power need. Exactly. Spider Dog, exactly. Yeah, I like protective stupidity, Woodrow. It has a very very good ring to it. Let's see. Okay. Oceanic. I already read that one. But since in reality, Big Brother is not omnipotent and the party is not infallible, there is a need for unwearying moment to moment flexibility in the treatment of facts. The key word here is black-white. Like so many newspeak words, this word has two mutually contradictory meanings. Applied to an opponent, it means the habit of impudently claiming that black is white, in contradiction of plain facts. Applied to a party member, it means a loyal willingness to say that black is white when party discipline demands this. But it means also the ability to believe that black is white, and more to know that black is white and to forget that one has ever believed the contrary. Crime means the faculty of crime stop means the faculty of stopping short as though instinct at the threshold of any dangerous thought. Yeah, Woodrow, YouTube is filled with protective stupidity. Therefore, protective stupidity is YouTube, using the logic from a few chapters ago. Yeah, absolutely. Is it your opinion, Winston, that the past has real existence from 1984, 1949? He did not remember any ending to his interrogation. There was a period of blackness, and then the cell room, or the cell or room in which he would, which he now was, in which he now was, had gradually materialized around him. He was almost flat on his back and unable to move. His body was held down at every essential point. Joey. Even the back of his head was gripped in some manner. O'Brien was looking down at him gravely and rather sadly. His face, seen from below, looked coarse and worn, with pouches under his eyes and tired lines from his nose to chin. He was older than Winston had thought him. He was perhaps 48 or 50. Under his hand there was a dial with a lever on top and figures running round the face. "I told you," said O'Brien, "that if we met again, it would be here." "Yes," said Winston. Without any warning, except a slight movement of O'Brien's hand, a wave of pain flooded his body. It was a frightening pain because he could not see what was happening, and he had the feeling that some mortal injury was being done to him. He did not know whether the thing was really happening or whether the effect was electrically produced, but his body was being wrenched out of shape and the joints were being slowly torn apart. This sounds absolutely terrible because I hate joint pain. Almost as much as I hate like jaw pain, tooth pain. Although the pain had brought the sweat out on his forehead, the worst of all was the fear that his backbone was about to snap. He set his teeth and breathed hard, his nose trying to keep silent as long as possible. "Boston, Mr. Bad Boy, Mr. Time Now, for daring to call a spade a spade." Yeah, the arthritis is very, very Kubrick-esque. Kubrick-esque. "You are afraid," said O'Brien, watching his face, "that in another moment something is going to break. Your especial fear is that it will be your backbone. You have a vivid mental picture of the vertebrae snapping apart and the spinal fluid dripping out of them. That is what you're thinking, is it not, Winston?" Winston did not answer. O'Brien drew back the lever on the dial. The wave of pain receded almost as quickly as it had come. "That was 40, said O'Brien. "You can see that the numbers on this dial run up to 100. Will you please remember throughout our conversation that I have it in my power to inflict pain on you at any moment in whatever degree I choose. If you tell me any lies or attempt to prevaricate in any way, or even fall below your usual level intelligence, you will cry out in pain instantly. Do you understand that?" "Yes," said Winston. O'Brien was looking down at him speculatively. More than ever, he had the air of a teacher taking pains with a wayward but promising child. "There is a party slogan dealing with the control of the past," he said. "Repeat it, if you please. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past," repeated Winston obediently. "Who controls the present controls the past," said O'Brien. nodding his head with slow approval. Is it your opinion, Winston, that the past has real existence? Hang on a second. Ambulances are about to come by. They get really loud up here for some reason, bouncing off the buildings. Again, the feeling of helplessness descended upon Winston. His eyes flitted towards the dial. He not only did not know whether yes or no was the answer that would save him from pain, he did not even know which answer he believed to be the true one. O'Brien smiled faintly. You're no metaphysician, Winston, he said. Until this moment, you had never considered what is meant by existence. I will put it more precisely. Does the past exist concretely in space? Is there somewhere other than a place, a world of solid objects where the past is still happening? No. Then where does the past exist, if at all? In records. It is written down. In records and in the mind, in human memories. In memory. Very well, then. We, the party, control all records and we control all memories. Then we control the past, do we not? But how can you stop people from remembering things? Cried Winston again, momentarily forgetting the dial. It is voluntary. It is outside oneself. How can you control memory? You have not controlled mine. O'Brien's manner grew stern again. He laid his hand on the dial. On the contrary, he said, you have not controlled it. That is what has brought you here. You are here because you have failed in humility, in self-discipline. You would not make the act of submission, which is the price of sanity. Yeah, that's what I'm saying to myself. I'm like, Winston, just shut up, man. No matter how many times I've read this book. You preferred to be a lunatic, a minority of one. Only the discipline of mind can see reality, Winston. You believe that reality is something objective, external, existing in its own right. You also believe the nature of reality is self-evident, external, existing in its own right. You also believe that the nature of reality is self-evident. When you delude yourself into thinking that you see something, you assume that everyone else sees the same thing as you. There are 4 lights. But I tell you, Winston, that reality is not external. Reality exists in the human mind and nowhere else. Not in the individual mind, which can make mistakes, and in any case, as soon perishes, only in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal. Whatever the party holds to be truth is truth. It's the point that O'Brien is driving home, isn't it, Woodrow? So, whatever the party holds to be truth is truth. It is impossible to see reality except by looking through the eyes of the party. That is the fact that you have got to relearn, Winston. It needs an act of self-destruction, an effort of the will. You must humble yourself before you can become sane. He paused for a few moments, as though to allow what he had been saying to sink in. Do you remember, he went on, writing in your diary, freedom is freedom to say that 2 plus 2 make 4? Yes, said Winston. O'Brien held up his left hand, its back towards Winston, with the thumb hidden and the 4 fingers extended. How many fingers am I holding up, Winston? 4. And if the party says that it is not 4 but 5, how many? 4. The word ended in a gasp of pain. The needle on the dial shot up to 55. The sweat sprung out all over Winston's body. The air tore into his lungs and issued again in deep groans, which even by clenching his teeth, he could not stop. O'Brien watched him, the 4 fingers still extended. He drew back the lever. This time, the pain was only slightly eased. How many fingers, Winston? Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 2 make 4. Four. The needle went up to 60. How many fingers, Winston? 4. 4. What else can I say? 4. The needle must have risen again, but he did not look at it. The heavy stern face and the 4 fingers filled his vision. The fingers stood up before his eyes like pillars, enormous, blurry, and seeming to vibrate, but unmistakably 4. How many fingers, Winston? 4. Stop it. Stop it. How can you go on? 4. 4. How many fingers, Winston? 5. 5. 5. No, Winston, that is no use. You're lying. You still think there are 4. How many fingers, please? 4. 5. 4. Anything you like. Only stop it. Stop the pain. Abruptly, he was sitting up with O'Brien's arm around his shoulders. He had perhaps lost consciousness for a few seconds. The bonds that held his body down were loosened. He felt very cold. He was shaking uncontrollably. His teeth were chattering. The tears were rolling down his cheeks. For a moment, he clung to O'Brien like a baby, curiously comforted by the heavy arm round his shoulders. He had the feeling that O'Brien was his protector, that the pain was something that came from outside, from some other source, and that it was O'Brien who would save him from it. You're a slow learner, Winston, said O'Brien gently. How can I help it? He blubbered. How can I help seeing what is in front of my eyes? 2 and 2 are 4. Sometimes, Winston, sometimes they are 5. Sometimes they are 3. Sometimes they are all of them at once. You must try harder. It's not easy to become sane. Indeed, it is not easy to become sane. We are all mad in here. Was that it? What the heck? I was so into it, I forgot that was it. Woodrow, I knew a guy that went through 3 times. Failed twice, made it the 3rd time. That is very Winston-esque, if you will. Friday. Do y'all want to start back Friday, or Do y'all want to start back Monday? I will we will get into a little lighter subject of 1054 and all that, the light-hearted history of the Catholic Church. I think it's funny. Well, commitment or needed to be committed, Woodrow. I'm thinking it's the latter. I wouldn't have gone more than once if I didn't make it the first time. Okay, we'll do Friday. I will get things together. Nomad, I'll send you a picture or something, and we'll get into it. Okay, Sherry. Like Sunday morning, Spider Dog. This was a short one. Well, I guess about the same length as it was yesterday. So, probably so. No, thank you, Nomad. Thank you. I probably so. I mean, we want to keep our momentum up, building things back up. So I'm quite sure we will have something. So I will probably see you all tonight. Soon as I know from Jeff, I will post up on Discord. Yeah, holiday and all, but you know, I'm going to keep doing this until we build our following up. Let me do this. I'll be there. Yes, if we don't see everyone, have a happy Thanksgiving. Eat too much, nap, and watch football. Oh, I'm having a great time. I was so into it, and hate that was the last of it. Maybe we'll do some. Y'all graduated, definitely graduated. Just being here and this is a show up and pass podcast. Maybe we'll get more in depth into some Orwell stuff. So, all right, y'all. I'll see y'all in a bit, hopefully.